Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm the newsman, Sam Sachs. We made it to Friday. You know what that means? That's right. Time to have 2 alcoholic beverages and fall asleep before 9 p.m. According to the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, more than 100,000 Palestinians have fled Rafah since the Israeli military dropped evacuation orders at the start of the week and intensified military operations in the area. There are more reports also of hospitals in Rafah being evacuated, with patients and staff forced to flee amid Israeli bombardment. Yet somehow, this does not constitute a red line for President Biden. Yet. One that would lead to certain weapon supplies being cut off. Instead, there are reports that the Biden administration is about to provide the Israelis with even more cover for their war crimes. State Department is expected to deliver to Congress today its analysis of Israel's compliance with international humanitarian law. This is the report that was supposed to be delivered earlier in the week, but was delayed amid Israel's increased assaults on Rafah. Axios reported that U.S. officials ultimately will conclude that Israel is not committing war crimes. Quote, the officials said it is going to describe the situation in very critical terms and mention that the State Department is still looking into several of those incidents. At the same time, Blinken will stop short of concluding that Israel has violated international law in the context of the National Security Memorandum. Well, I guess it's just a coincidence then that every school, bakery, and hospital in Gaza has been destroyed, and over 35,000 people, including over 14,000 kids, slaughtered. I guess we just have to also ignore the endless videos posted on social media by Israeli soldiers enthusiastically committing war crimes. Axios added that U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, has been lobbying behind the scenes to ensure that the report certifies that Israel is no longer blocking humanitarian aid. Of course, that's just total bullshit. There hasn't been a single day since October when Israel allowed enough aid into Gaza, which is why there's now a famine. And since the Israeli military took over the Rafah border crossing earlier in the week, aid trucks have been blocked. Israeli settlers are also sabotaging roads leading to Gaza in order to prevent aid trucks from reaching the desperate population. And they attacked and torched an UNRWA headquarters in occupied East Jerusalem. UNRWA's planning director told Al Jazeera about the increasingly desperate situation in Rafah. Quote, these are populations that are already on the brink of famine, who are now being subjected to a medieval siege coupled with scorched earth and heavy bombardment. Already desperate conditions will get worse, and we will see multitudes of casualties, not just from the bombing, but the hunger, the disease, and the starvation. On Thursday, in response to the possibility that the U.S. might condition future military aid if Israel presses on in Rafah, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his troops would be undeterred and continue fighting their campaign, which most human rights organizations, international legal observers, and a majority of Democratic voters in the U.S. have concluded is a genocide. Netanyahu said, quote, if we have to stand alone, we will stand alone. If we need to, we will fight with our fingernails, but we have much more than fingernails. Oh yeah, what more do you have? Are you going to try to destroy Gaza with rave music? Donald Trump is asking the dirty energy industry for $1 billion to help him win the election. Former president made the solicitation last month during a meeting with big oil executives at Mar-a-Lago. The Washington Post reported, quote, Trump's response stunned several of the executives in the room overlooking the ocean. You all are wealthy enough, he said, that you should raise $1 billion to return me to the White House. At the dinner, he vowed to immediately reverse dozens of President Biden's environmental rules and policies and stop new ones from being enacted. Giving $1 billion would be a deal, Trump said, because of the taxation and regulation they would avoid thanks to him. This is actually one of the few things Trump can promise where he does have some credibility. Back when he was president, he weakened or killed off more than 125 environmental regulations. The dude is as committed to the destruction of the planet as the aliens from Independence Day. And this notion that oil companies somehow have it rough under Biden is absurd. The US is producing more oil than any other country in the history of the world. We're spitting out 13 million barrels of the toxic stuff a day, and oil firms are raking in record profits, thanks in large part to rampant price gouging that has been allowed to go on unchecked. But when given the choice between enjoying mega profits under a Democratic president or mega profits under a Republican one, extraction capitalists will always choose the latter. Thing is, even though Trump is an outspoken ally to oil companies, they don't actually need to pay him $1 billion to get what they want. They already have the conservative Supreme Court doing their bidding with successive rulings aimed at deconstructing the Environmental Protection Agency and the rest of the regulatory state. Honestly, the money is probably better spent on more yachts for executives. When workers go on strike, one of the strategies Capitol uses to break it is simply trying to starve them out. Hold out as long as possible, drain union strike funds, and when workers start facing the threat of eviction, they'll come crawling back. Sometimes management is explicit about this. Like during last year's Hollywood writers' strike, they figure they have more money. They can hold out longer. After all, they're the capitalists. They have the capital. But one way to level the playing field is to ensure that workers who are on strike can collect unemployment benefits. 2 states have passed laws to allow it, ensuring that workers have a lifeline when they picket in New Jersey and in New York. Last year, amid that writers' strike, California lawmakers passed a bill to expand unemployment insurance to include striking workers, but Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed it under heavy pressure from business interests like the Chamber of Commerce. And now there's news of another Democratic governor who also wants to deny striking workers a level playing field against the boss. Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont spoke out against a recently passed bill that would provide lost wages to workers on strike. He claimed at first that the bill was too vague and, quote, too cute by half, but when pressed, Lamont admitted that he just doesn't support the concept of the state helping striking workers. Take a look.
Do you support the concept? Does New York and New Jersey have something similar on the books?
I'm not sure I do.
Why is that?
What? Look, I'm, one of the 6 pro-union guys in Greenwich, Connecticut. I think because union movement was not strong over the last 30 years, we've hollowed out our middle class, especially when it comes to the service sector. I support the right to organize. I support defined benefit plans. I support expanded health care. And I want to make sure that we have a strong labor that's able to negotiate at the table. Does that mean I want the taxpayers, subsidizing striking workers? I don't think I do.
So the governor appears to understand the role that unions play in strengthening the working class, yet still doesn't have a good reason why he opposes the bill. That's the kind of stuff you say when you're feeling pressure from the business lobby, but don't want to admit to it. Meanwhile, in Vermont, the state legislature passed its own version of the PRO Act, aimed at boosting union organizing in the state. The Teamsters celebrated passage of the bill, calling it a, quote, game changer for workers. The union urged Governor Phil Scott to sign it into law immediately. We didn't get a chance to do working class history on yesterday's show, so we're doing it today instead. Thanks to the team over there for giving us access to the vast archives. Let's open them up. First off, happy birthday to John Brown. Born this week in 1800, he was one of the best to ever do it. Another birthday, this one for the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen. This week in 1863, the union was founded. At 161 years, it's the oldest union in all of North America. I'd say here's to another 161 years, but hopefully we have this capitalism issue sorted before then. Okay, let's fast forward now to 1894 in the epic Pullman strike. Train car makers at the Pullman Palace Car Company put down their tools and walked off the job to protest wage cuts and poor working conditions. A portion of the workers were represented by the American Railway Union, then under the leadership of one Eugene Debs. And the union played a critical role in taking the strike nationwide by getting unionized switchmen around the country to refuse to hook Pullman-made cars to trains and unhitch those that were already attached. As workers were retaliated against for participating in the strike, more workers joined in on it. And by the end of June, over 125,000 people were on strike. Both the state and federal governments then responded with overwhelming force, calling up troops to ensure the trains kept moving. And as many as 30 workers were killed in a confrontation with troops in early July in Chicago. Eventually, the strike was put down. But the rail companies lost millions of dollars. Eugene Debs was imprisoned for his role leading the work stoppage, and he emerged from jail an even more hardened socialist. Next up, 1912, and it's the New York City waiters' strike. Started at the Belmont Hotel, where about 300 unionized workers walked out into the streets. Their union, the International Hotel Workers Union, put forward demands that included wage increases, a 10-hour workday, a day off each week, and sanitary lockers and toilets. Workers at an additional 54 hotels and 30 restaurants joined the strike, which persisted through May and into June. Hotels eventually agreed to some of the demands, and workers voted to end the strike, but the hotels still refused to recognize the union, so there was never really any labor peace, and the industry would get hit by several more strikes over the next decade. And finally, let's wrap it up in 1974 in the national rail strike in India, the largest industrial work stoppage in world history. 1.7 million workers are estimated to have participated in the strike, which was led by union leader and president of India's Socialist Party, George Fernandez. The main grievance workers had was they were required to be on duty the entire time a train was on a trip, which meant working for days on end. During the strike, workers laid on tracks to block trains from operating. The action lasted 20 days before it was violently put down by the government of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, who just 1 month later would declare a national emergency in India and order the mass arrest of political opponents and suppression of independent media. The government also outlawed strikes, punished labor unions, and froze workers' wages. It's considered one of the most controversial periods in Indian history. To learn more about these stories and other events that happened this week in working class history, follow the project online, listen to the podcast, and subscribe on Patreon. Back with more next week. It's Friday, time to dishonor a rich person for being a piece of shit. We forgot to solicit nominees on Twitter, but let's just pretend that Arona nominated all the damn landlords, Nora nominated Genocide Joe, and the Wolf nominated, let's say, Hillary Clinton. I think that's about right. All very strong nominations, but ultimately, this week's rich dick is Ann Coulter. You know, it's been a while since I've heard from the millionaire conservative writer, but she popped up this week on failed Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy's Truth podcast. And boy, she hasn't lost a step. And by that, I mean she's still extremely racist. Now, just setting the stage here, Vivek invited Ann on the podcast to talk about nationalism and why it's actually a good thing despite its associations with fascism. He titled the episode, Ann Coulter on the N-word. Nationalism. He's just asking for it. Ann was clearly thinking of a different N-word. And within the first 30 seconds of the interview, starting, like right after Vivek introduced her, this is what she launches into.
So, Ann, thanks for coming on, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. Thanks for having me. That was a fantastic opening monologue. I too am a fan of yours. I'm going to make a point of disagreeing with you so that it will be fun. You are so bright and articulate, and I guess I can call you articulate since you're not an American black. Can't say that about them. That's derogatory. And that was a great opening segment. Lots of things to talk about there. Oh, and I agreed with many, many things you said during, in fact, probably more than most other candidates when you were running for president. But I still would not have voted for you because you're an Indian.
Whoa. Yikes. But Ann was just getting started.
There is a core national identity that is the identity of the WASP. And that doesn't mean we can't take anyone else in, a Sri Lankan or a Japanese or an Indian. But the core around which the nation's values are formed is the WASP. We've never had a president who didn't have at least partial English ancestry.
Damn. Ann is tapping into that old school racism. You got your neo-Nazis of today wanting to take America back to the pre-civil rights era. Ann wants to go back to the fucking 18th century. Now, it's at this point that you would think Vivek would have some self-respect and call out Ann's racist bullshit, since she's essentially talking about him and how she can never look beyond his ethnicity. But instead, he continues the interview, trying to find common ground with her on other nativist bullshit, before slightly pushing back on her racist claims. Take a look.
I think you and I share that in common, actually. I don't know, I've never asked you this, Ann, but I assume from seeing the things you said, tell me if I'm right about this, you're probably against the existence of dual citizenship as a concept. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yes. You and I share that in common.
Outrageous.
It's incoherent. It's not just outrageous. It's incoherent. It's oxymoronic. How could you possibly have a loyalty to two different nations where the essence of citizenship is which nation to whom you had your undivided loyalty? That's what the essence of citizenship is all about. So you and I agree on so much there. But where I wouldn't say lose you, but I may fail to fully understand you, is on that axis of citizenship, what does ethnicity have to do with the matter? And I think you would be well served, and maybe this could be a great platform for you to do it, to make the case for why that, what you put at WASP basis for the American identity.
It's because she's a white supremacist, dude. She just spelled it out for you. But in case you weren't paying attention, she does it again.
But like I said, anyone can adopt this. I guess what I just said, if any of your children marry a DAR, I would definitely vote for them for president.
DAR being Daughters of the American Revolution, a reactionary organization that until like the 1980s refused to allow black people into it. And continued to get more racist as the interview went on, with almost no pushback from Vivek.
I hate listening to feminists talk about, like, you know, these brutal, sexist American men. Whoa, wait until the third world has moved in. You're going to see that this is the best you ever had it, American women.
Again, she's talking about you, dude. Yet you just can't wipe that stupid fucking grin off your face. Have just a shred of self-respect. Vivek is like a guy who got politically polarized taking devil's advocate positions in debate club and is now just a fascist. And because of that, he has trouble making friends with normal people. So he's tried to carve out a place for himself with the other freaks on the far right. But he'll never be accepted there either because they just see him as a brown guy. After the interview, Vivek wasn't done humiliating himself. He tweeted, quote, "Ann Coulter told me flat out to my face that she couldn't vote for me because you're an Indian, even though she agreed with me more than most other candidates. I disagree with her, but respect she had the guts to speak her mind. It was a riveting hour. The Truth Podcast is back." It's back, all right. Tune in next week when Vivek spends an hour complimenting the man who's banging his wife. I'll admit that one of the reasons I chose Anne this week is because it also gave me a chance to talk about what a pathetic little worm Vivek is, too. Two fascists with one stone, you could say. Ann Coulter, for being racist as hell, you are this week's Rich Dick. All right, friends, the show ends with a sunrise from Colorado. It was sent in by Smitty in Denver. Enjoy. Thank you, Smitty. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels. One day capitalism will fall. Till then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.